I'm Marty, and this is Basics of Faith. I'd like to thank very much Corby Williams. She is a minister in the Kansas City area, and Corby made a donation to support for operating expenses for the broadcasting of Basics of Faith, and we very much appreciate it. And just shout out to Corby. Thank you. We're entering a new section from Exodus to Deuteronomy and what they call the Pentateuch. This spans the life of Moses from his birth to his death, and Moses lived to the age of 120 years old. The timeline was approximately 1526 to 1406. And after saying that, I need to back up and discuss some stuff with you. So they call them alternative dates by some scholars, and these scholars date the Exodus as taking place like 150 to 200 years after the dates I just told you. So later than what I described, and they seem to be skeptical of the route that the Exodus took and the number of Israelites that traveled that route, and that's besides the dates. So there's a little skepticism going on there, so I don't know. I don't know how to explain this, except that the main thing I want you to get out of this is you may see alternative dates, and just to give you an idea of where they came from. But some of these scholars, they believe the first 9 plagues could have just naturally occurred, so they don't give that as a miracle. They do describe the 10th plague, the Passover, where all the first born were killed. They believe that's a miracle, but the first 9 they don't necessarily believe they were. And also whenever God gave the Israelites the manna, they say that in the desert areas there was a honey-like substance that people could eat there naturally, so they don't really believe in the manna deal too. And also the Septuagint and what they called the Samaritan Pentateuch reports various chronologies too. So, and that dates all the way back to Abraham. So whenever you change one, you change a bunch more. But in saying all this, whenever it comes to, so this would be more ancient stuff, but whenever it comes to the more later stuff, like when the Syrians took over, or whenever Babylonians took over the Israel kingdoms, that they're pretty much on cue there as far as they accept those dates. So you have to backtrack everything. So like I say, I kind of focus just on approximations on the ancient stuff, and then focus more on the newer stuff, those dates, whatever they, everybody kind of agrees on that. So that's where I'm at on that. But so we said Moses lived to be 120 years old, and he was about 80 years old whenever they started the Exodus with the Israelites. And to backtrack, and then they were in the wilderness for 40 years before his death, so there's where you get the 120. So starting all this out, if you remember back in Genesis, Jacob moved his family to Egypt, and they were made slaves there for 400 years. Okay? Then the Exodus took place 120 years, and then they cried out to God, and God sent them Moses to rescue them. We should keep this in mind whenever trouble comes our way, that all we got to do is call out to God and whenever we need rescuing. So this part here can be confusing. We're going to talk about some confusing things today. It's kind of like last time, I told you that I was more of a, if I had to describe myself, I was more like the Bible question guy instead of the Bible answer guy. I have a lot more questions than I have answers. I'll just be, whenever I'm studying, I'm always wanting to know why this and why that. But anyway, this is kind of confusing, but let's read Exodus 2:18. Actually, I'm going to start up here let's go 15, 2:15 in Exodus. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh. He settled in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. But some shepherds came and drove them away. Moses got up, and if you remember, that's why Moses got in trouble, was that an Egyptian was being harsh to a Israelite slave, and somehow Moses killed the man. And so that's why he had to flee, that we were just talking about. And so it seems like Moses always took up for, the underdog type person. But they came to draw water and filled their troughs to water their father's flock. But some shepherds came and drove them away. Moses got up and came to their defense and watered their flock. When they returned to their father, Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come back so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian helped us against the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Where is he? Why did he leave the man? Invite him to break bread." Moses agreed to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah in marriage. She bore a son, and he named him Gershom, for he said, "I have been an alien residing in a foreign land." Okay? So this Reuel, this is Zipporah's dad, right? And then if we switch over here to the first of Exodus 3, let's talk about this. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Oreb, the mountain of God. So this Jethro is the same as Reuel. So I wanted to point that out because that's kind of confusing. But it's the same man, and it's father Zipporah and the other 6 daughters. And so that's his father-in-law. They called him Jethro, but he could also be called Reuel. And let's go to Exodus 20. Everybody probably knows this. But I'm going to point out something today that maybe you didn't know. So Exodus 20, I'll just start reading it here. Then God spoke all these words. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." We call that the first commandment, okay? Then it says, "You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments." So, you shall not make for yourself an idol. In a Protestant church, that's considered the second commandment. But in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, they combine those into the first commandment. So the first commandment that the Protestant Church has says, "You shall have no other gods before me." And then the Protestant is the second commandment, "You shall not make for yourself an idol." The Catechism of the Catholic Church puts that as one commandment. And so the next one, "You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name." That would be their second commandment, and that would be the third commandment in the Protestant church. And so you're bumped up one every time. The fourth commandment, Protestant church, would be, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in it, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it." Okay, So number 5 would be honor your father and your mother so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. They consider that to be the first commandment with promise. Okay? If you ever hear something of that nature, you know what they're talking about. Number 6 would be you shall not murder. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. Number 8, you shall not steal. Number 9 in the Protestant is you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This is where it gets tricky because you're bumped up one, then to get 10 commandments, and this is how the Catechism of the Catholic Church does this. They divide, well, the Protestant church would say number 10, they divide that into 2. Okay, so number 9 you shall not covet your neighbor's house in the Catechism. And then number 10 would be you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or male or female slave or ox or donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So it's not a big deal. It's just a different way of numbering the 10 Commandments. Okay? So, okay, I wanted to talk about 2018. Let me read that to you. When all the people witnessed a thunder and lightning, the sound of a trumpet, and the mountain smoking, they were afraid and trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, or we will die." Okay, I've heard some scholars and read where they believe this to be the first Pentecost because it's a relationship with God, kind of like in Acts 2, the Holy Spirit came. It was a relationship with God. It was God showing himself, okay? So that is, in Acts 2, that's Pentecost, okay? But some refer to, in the Old Testament, as this being the first Pentecost. So if we go back to the Exodus of the Israelites, Passover was whenever they left, okay? Because remember, they put the blood over the doorways, and then they packed their lunch, kind of speak, and you know, did the unleavened bread and things of that nature. So if you count 50 days after that, that would be Pentecost in my mind, okay? But some people will tell you that they didn't even reach Mount Sinai until 3 months later, so that'd be like 90 days. So there's a thing there. So I'll let you figure that out, but I'm just pointing it out to you. Okay. This is something different too. You think of the 10 Commandments, okay? But actually there's 613 commandments, okay? You got 248, what they call mandatory laws, and you have 365 prohibition laws. Okay, and I'm just briefly going to tell you what's going on here, but in the 248 mandatory laws, the first law would be God, concerning God. Second would be concerning Torah. The third be temple and priest. 4 is sacrifices. 5 is ritual purity. Donations to the temple, the sabbatical year, animals for consumption. You know, in Leviticus, I think it's 10 or 11, they break down what the Israelites could and couldn't eat. 9 was festivals. 10 was community. 11, idolatry. War. Social. Family. Judicial. Concerning slaves. And I guess the last one was considering torts. And I looked up torts for you, and torts it's like a jurisprudence type thing. Torts are laws for which civil actions can be brought, okay? So it's not criminal, but it's civil disputes and things of that nature. And So here's the 365 prohibition laws. They concern idolatry and related practices, prohibitions resulting from historical events, blasphemy, concerning the temple, sacrifices, about the priest, Nazarites. So I looked up what it takes to be a Nazarite. And it says to qualify as a Nazarite, one must consecrate themselves and take a vow of separation and self-imposed abstinence for the purpose of some special service. Okay, so it's basically a vow that a person takes. And they have to refrain from any product of grapes. They cannot have use of a razor and avoid any contact with a dead body. So in the Bible, there's 3 people that qualified or defined that. And that would be Samson, Samuel, and John the Baptist. Okay? Take up here with going back to the prohibitive laws. Number 8 would be about agriculture. Number 9 was loans, business, and treatment of slaves. I'm just going to throw this out there. Whenever the Jews were dispersed, okay, after 70 AD, the diaspora, the dispersion of the Jews, they went all over the world. But usually whenever they went there, they went to what they called ghettos. So it was places where you had a concentration of Jews. And whenever you think of ghettos, you think of a negative place, and I'm sure the living conditions weren't that great, but it kind of kept them together, so they kind of kept on practicing what they believed. So in a way, as far as their community, that was a good thing, you know. And so getting back to this business deal, was they were really good at business, which caused people probably not to like them as much, and also give them an excuse for trying to take their money and resources and stuff away from them. See what I'm saying? Because, I mean, that's what Germany did, you know, under Hitler, was, yeah, they just came in and took all their possessions. And so, like I say, they were very good at business, and still are. In fact, a lot of your banking industry is made up of Jewish people. And so number 10 would be justice. Number 11 is incest and other forbidden relationships. And the last was monarchy. And monarchy means just to be ruled by a king or queen. Okay? So in a way, England would be like that because part of our government is royal people. Okay, this is kind of interesting too. The ancient cultures had like letters or characters, or they call them hieroglyphics and things. Okay, but that was mainly for accounting purposes for like the monarchy, like the king or the queen. So it really didn't have anything to do with the general population. And so if you take the Hebrew language, it's made up of 22 characters. Like our English language is made up of 26 characters, the alphabet. So between the characters being able to be recognized, and that you had the Levites and the priests and all these people out teaching at least on the Sabbath every week, you know, you had an educated society. And so they were probably the really first educated society. And that education goes a long ways, just, you know. So it helped them a lot. And they were probably the first, and they might have been the best at it, you know, for their time anyway. Okay, let's talk about sacrifices. There's 3 voluntary sacrifices, and then there's 2 required sacrifices. in the Old Testament, okay? And for the required sacrifice, you had a sin offering, which is for atonement of a specific unintentional sin, while the guilt offering is for an unintentional sin that requires a 20% fine of restitution to satisfy the required sacrifice. Okay? So it's like a penalty. The voluntary sacrifices are the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the peace offerings. A burnt offering is made for atonement for an unintentional general sin and commitment with complete surrender to God and to express devotion. Okay? And this is voluntary. A grain offering is made when one recognizes the goodness of God, his provision, and to be devoted to him. And then a peace offering is made in times of thanksgiving and fellowship with a communal meal. Sounds like Thanksgiving to me. Okay? So, Leviticus 23. Let's go there. Okay, we're going to pick up these sacrifices through this in a way. Okay, so just kind of bear with me here. So Leviticus 23 has the sacred days and festivals listed, and the Sabbath is the seventh day. I got about 5 minutes here, guys. I'm going to start reading with Exodus 23, or Leviticus 23, sorry. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed festivals of the Lord that you shall proclaim as holy convocations, my appointment festivals. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord throughout your settlements." Okay, this is the Sabbath or the seventh day. Now we're going to talk about Passover. It's in March or April of every year, and it recognizes the deliverance of the Exodus. These are appointed festivals of the Lord, the holy convocations, which you shall celebrate at the time appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, there shall be a Passover offering to the Lord. And on the 15th day of the same month is the festival of unleavened bread to the Lord. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not work at your occupations. For 7 days you shall present the Lord's offerings by fire. On the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation, and you shall not work at your occupations. This is the festival of unleavened bread, and it reminds the Israelites of the Exodus. Now we're going to go to the festival of first fruits, and it recognizes God's goodness in the land. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, and you reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall raise a sheaf before the Lord, that you may find acceptance on the day after the Sabbath. The priest shall raise it. On the day when you raise up a sheaf, you shall offer a lamb a year old without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the grain offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of choice flour mixed with oil, an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. And the drink offering with it shall be of wine 1/4 of a hin. You shall eat no bread or parched grain or fresh ears until that very day, until you have brought the offering of your God. It is a statute forever, your generations in all your settlements." Okay, and then we're going to talk about this, and this has 3 different names. It can be the Festival of Weeks, the Festival of Harvest, or Pentecost. Okay, we usually think of it as Pentecost. "And from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, you shall count off 7 weeks. They shall be complete. So that'd be 49 days, right? They shall be complete. You shall count until the day after the seventh Sabbath, 50 days. Then you shall present an offering of new grain to the to the Lord. And 50 is defined as Pentecost. Okay. You shall bring from your settlements 2 loaves of bread as an elevation offering, each made of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of choice flour, baked with leaven, as first fruits to the Lord. I never really noticed that if they use leaven there. You shall present with the bread 7 lambs a year old, without blemish, 1 young bull, and 2 rams. They shall be a burnt offering to the Lord, along with their grain offering and their drink offerings, and offerings by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord. You shall also offer 1 male goat for a sin offering, and 2 male lambs a year old as a sacrifice of well-being. The priest shall raise them with the bread of the first fruits as an elevation offering before the Lord. Together with the 2 lambs, they shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. On that same day you shall make proclamation. You shall hold a holy convocation. You shall not work at your occupations. This is statute forever in all your settlements throughout your generations. And I probably ought to say this: views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and or their affiliated and subordinated ministries and or nonprofits. And till next time, we bless you and keep you. Have a good week.